Hello and welcome to Cicerone Live. I'm Hannah Stevenson and thank you for joining me for this event this evening. Andalusia offers accessible walking of all types for all types of walkers. Long distance treks such as the GR7 or the Coast to Coast Walk, or shorter walks along the coastlines or trails of the region. It's surprisingly wild considering the excellent transport links, and Guy Hunter Watts is testament to the fact that Andalusia can keep walkers busy and inspired for years. Decades even. Guy Hunter Watts has written several guidebooks to Andalusia, having lived and worked in the region since the 1980s. His most recent Cicerone guidebook covers the GR7 trek, part of the incredibly long E4 route. He's also got 4 other books on day walks and treks in Andalusia. He really is an expert on this, so please challenge him with your questions. I will introduce Guy in a minute or so, and he's going to give us an overview of his 5 books in 15 minutes. He will rattle through quite a lot of content, but the video will be online afterwards if you need to watch it again. We will have plenty of time for questions after Guy's presentation. You can ask questions in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, or by emailing live@cicerone.co.uk. Joe is in the background and he'll be collecting them, and I will ask as many as I can after Guy's presentation. We're also offering viewers a special discount on any of Guy's guidebooks, including the upcoming GR7 book. Just use the code Andalucia25 at the checkout to get 25% off. This code will be displayed on the screen at certain points throughout the presentation, so it shouldn't be too hard to remember. You can find full details of Guy's books on the Cicerone website, www.cicerone.co.uk. He's also written a number of articles for us, so it's worth having a little time exploring the site. Apart from his guidebooks, there are over 75 search results for Spain, including podcasts, previous live events, videos, and articles. Okay, I will now bring Guy into the stream, and he will do a presentation all about Andalusia for us. So welcome, Guy. Oh, we had a mute error. Sorry, Guy, you are off mute now. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah, nice to see, or rather, to be here tonight, and thank you to all of those who are attending this meeting. Amazing to get a thumbs up from a group of fantastic walkers who I hiked a few hundred kilometers with a few years back. That's amazing. But what I wanted to do tonight was just to give a brief overview of walking in Andalusia, starting off with a little video that I made to promote a rental property. But I've cut out all the boring stuff about the house, but it gives you a little feel perhaps for just how beautiful Andalusian mountains can be. Moving on from that, I'm going to be concentrating on a new Cicerone guide, which is called Trekking the GR7. Anyway, nice to be here, and let's kick off with this little video, which is made about the Ronda area, but it gives you a feel for what the mountains in this part of the world are really all about. So here we go. I'll just maximize it on the screen, and we're ready to go.
A half-hour's drive from Spain's Mediterranean coast, Ronda is one of Andalusia's most spectacularly situated mountain towns.
Guy, you haven't shared your screen, sorry.
North of the Grathalema Natural Park, Monte Corto is...
Hey? Sorry, Anna. I thought it was all set up automatically.
Technical problems plague us all.
Okay, sorry. So we're going.
Okay.
Sorry, back to. I'm going to have to start up the video again. Sorry about this, folks. Where are we? Okay.
Sorry about this, guys. We did test this, and this is always the way. Right, I will add it now, and we'll watch the video.
Okay, ready to go?
Yep. Yes, yeah.
A half-hour's drive from Spain's Mediterranean coast, Ronda is one of Andalucia's most spectacularly situated mountain towns. West of the village, just to the north of the Grazalema Natural Park, Monte Corto is amongst the prettiest of the so-called Pueblos Blancos, or white villages. Stunning hiking trails lead straight out from Sahara, whilst Grazalema, just a quarter of an hour's drive from Monte Corto, is at the centre of an extensive network of footpaths and has a number of excellent restaurants. The walking trails in the Grazalema Natural Park, which is a UNESCO biosphere, are amongst the most spectacular in Europe, and on any of our local walks, you're almost bound to see soaring griffon vultures, which nest on the high rock faces of the Garganta Verde.
Okay, well, I hope that little introductory video just gave you a slight feel for just how beautiful the mountains in southern Spain can be. But the first thing to be said about Spain is that it is a very mountainous country. Looking at this map of Spain, you can see there are very few parts of the peninsula which aren't actually mountainous, really just the valleys between the different mountain chains. And this is very much the case with Andalusia itself. Really, the only flat piece of land in Andalusia is at the delta, the far western end of the Guadalquivir Valley, which cuts, basically divides the Sierra Morena from the Great Betica range of mountains, which stretch kind of saber-like all the way across southern Spain, Andalusia, down towards Algeciras and Gibraltar and Morocco. And in fact, these are very grandiose mountains, and it's actually in the Sierra Nevada, we have southern Spain's highest peak, which is the Mulhacén, which clocks in at 3,479 meters, so pretty high. Tourism to Spain really kicks off in the 1850s, when Andalusia becomes like a side kind of diversion off the Grand Tour. This is when travel for travel's sake is kicking off. Andalusia was seen as a particularly exotic destination, and most of all for its great cities and its Moorish legacy. Spain was under Islamic rule for 8 centuries, and people would make the journey on horseback or by cart to the great mosque of Cordoba, built by the Umayyad dynasty. They would visit Sevilla, and where the famous Giralda Tower, a Christian belfry, was put on top of the original Moorish minaret. And probably the highlight of any trip in the 1800s, or rather the 1900s as well, was to see the great Alhambra complex of palaces, which was built by 21 sultans of the Nasrid dynasty, just at the time when Islamic power in Spain is really waning. All of this really begins to change in the 1960s, when Franco, persuaded by his by the Opus Dei economists, Franco was reluctantly persuaded to abandon tourism and open the gates to sun, sea, and sand tourism. And this is when a lot of the development takes place along the Costa del Sol in Andalusia. This is pretty much the case throughout the 60s, 70s, but in the 80s, things really start to change when Spain becomes a member in 1986, alongside Portugal, of the European Economic Community. And at this stage, huge funds start pouring into Spain for rural development. At the same time, this is when a consistent, structured policy of protecting Andalusia's many beautiful, pristine ecosystems by legislation. And this is when we get the creation of parques naturales and the doubly protected parques nacionales. At the moment, we have something like, I think, 23 natural parks and 3 national parks. and inland Spain begins to get on the map. Every little village in Andalusia would now has funding to open small hotels and to mark out hiking trails. But when I first came here, at least, there was very little in the way of waymarking, and I actually, for my first guides, I actually turned to local shepherds to find where the paths were. Who better than they to know how to move through the mountains? My first book was Walking in Andalusia, which basically was my selection of the 6 most beautiful areas with a week of walking in each area. And I'd say that's a really good starting point for anybody wanting to explore Andalusia. Coastal walks, self-explanatory. My own Andalusian coast-to-coast walk, which for people who might be listening in tonight, we walked it together some years ago, and it was wonderful. And more recently, a guide to the mountains of Ronda and Grazalema. The areas I chose, Aracena, very beautiful, over near the border of Portugal. My own home area of Ronda, very varied. The Alcornocales Park, the mountains just behind Nerja, which are stunningly beautiful and very easily accessed from Malaga Airport. Of course, we had to have the Sierra Nevada in the cut, and more remote, more difficult to get to, the natural park of Cathola. Maybe out of these 6 areas, if I had to choose, well, surprise, surprise, I'd go for my home area. This is Grazalema. It's an incredibly diverse ecosystem, an incredible, something like 1/3 of all wildflower species are present in Grazalema. And the village itself is a great base for a one-stop or a one-base walking holiday. But it's very rugged terrain, as you can see, jagged limestone all around you, but very beautiful. Second choice would probably be, or maybe equal first, is where I am actually talking to you from. I'm spending with my wife and our dog, and we are booked into a little place just off to the right, actually, of this photograph, for the 5 hot summer weeks, because this is a destination where you really can walk in summer. For example, the temperature today, maximum 24. But what I really want to talk about tonight and focus on is the new Cicerone guide, which is going to be published, I believe Hannah will confirm this, in about 6 weeks' time, September. Delayed because of COVID, like so many other guidebooks, of course. Trekking the GR7 in Andalusia. The GR7 is one of many GR. By the way, GR comes from the French Grande Randonnée, or Gran Recorrido in Spanish, and it basically means long distance footpath. And my book is about the Andalusian section of what is the longest walking trail in Europe, the GR7 E4, which was created by the European Ramblers Association in the 1970s, waymarked by the Mountaineering Federation of Andalusia. And this is a map of the complete trail. If you look at it carefully, you can see it begins in Tarifa on Spain's Atlantic coast, gradually cuts its way through the mountains to somewhere just east of Antequera. And at this point, the trail divides. You've got a northern variant and a southern variant. The common stage is, just a little bit about the waymarking. Yes, it is waymarked with standard GR, that's to say a red and white waymarking, which you will have seen in many other places. However, it must be said that in places, the waymarking isn't that much of a help. Sometimes the posts have been knocked down. As you can see here, it's been washed away because the trail was waymarked so long ago. Good news is that it's currently being re-waymarked, but this is a trail where ideally you would have, definitely you should have a map, a compass, and a keen sense of where you're going. The layout of the book, very similar within very much in keeping with Cicerone house style, a resume of each stage, of course, ascent, descent, etc. What I think is great, I'm very happy to have the elevation profiles in the guide, which really can give you a feel for where you're going to have to expend your energy. It can help with planning the way you are going to approach the day. And the Cicerone digital maps, and these are super accurate because these are created by imposing my GPX file of the walk on top of the digital maps. One thing I spent a lot of time on, and I love doing, is researching the history of each of the villages. Fascinating, and maybe some little anecdotes about them. And of course, we talk about the accommodation. My personal recommendations of where to stay, and important transport, how to get in and out of the different villages if you're joining the trail midway along. So, talking about that common first section, which is 11 stages, begins on the beach in Tarifa, and a very beautiful beach it is. From Tarifa, you're heading north through the mountains, first entering the natural park of Los Alcornocales, of the Cork Oaks, following tracks, very little tarmac involved in the GR7, footpaths, and at times stunning sections of cobbled medieval footpath, to the side of which here you can see the Cork Oaks stripped of their bark at the bottom. Heading on north, we pass through the stunning mountain town of Ronda, very much on the tourist trail, which could well be worth an extra night. And from Ronda, the trail heads further on, heading east, or really at this stage on a northeast tack, passing close to the Chorro Gorge, where you could divert to walk the recently created Caminito del Rey, or the Walk of the King, because it was inaugurated by King Alfonso XIII in 1921. That can be, but you'll need to book weeks in advance. Months, very, very popular destination. One to Antequera, at the end of the common stage, you then have a choice. You're either going to take the northern section or the southern section. And I must say, I would find it hard to choose between the two. If you're, first of all, the northern section is going to take you initially for about 6 or 7 days through the vast olive belt, which stretches really from Antequera all the way up and through the province of Jaén. It is monoculture, and driving through it, it can be exceedingly dull. But the funny thing is, once you're walking through it, it takes on a whole different character. And I was amazed at just how beautiful the northern route of the GR7 proved to be. It takes you past beautiful reservoirs and through several villages where almost guaranteed you won't meet any other foreign people. Here again, you can see GR7 waymarking, extremely faded. And one of the nice things is on this northern section of the walk, you looking south, you sometimes will see the distant Sierra Nevada. And look at this, olives, and in the background, snow. It says a lot about Andalusia. Moving on, as we're heading northeast towards the end of the trail, at its eastern end, we pass through the fabulous Sierra de Machina Natural Park. Here I had the amazing chance, or good luck, to be within meters of an imperial eagle, one of the most fantastic sightings or wildlife events of my particular odyssey in walking the trail. And then we get as far as Cathola. Cathola is very dear to my own heart. I started taking walking groups here more than 30 years ago. And the Cathola Park, you can see, it's a beautiful mountain village, and the mountains rise up sheer behind Cathola. And the park, the GR7 cuts straight through the heart of the Cathola Park, pretty demanding at times. Here you can see griffon vultures. This is what's called the heraldic pose, where they're basically drying their feathers and regulating their body temperature. Most extraordinary sight. Beautiful limestone scenery. Here you can see the buckled limestone layers as you descend the Rio Borosa. And eventually it leads you to Puebla de Don Fadrique. However, if you're feeling slightly more adventurous, because it's a slightly longer route, you might adopt the southern, or you might choose to walk the southern route. The southern route from Antequera heads on east, and on day 2 into the southern route, you pick up an old Via Verde, or rather a Via Verde, which is basically Via Verde means a railway track, which has been converted for walking and cycling. This particular one led from Malaga to the market gardens, which were at Ventas de Zafaraya. Another beautiful section of 4 or 5 days takes you on through the Sierra, along the northern flank of the Sierras de Tejeda, Almijara, and Alama, before we eventually get to what certainly is one of the highlights of the GR7, and that's where the GR7 traverses the southern flanks of the Sierra Nevada. And these are the villages of La Bujara, are the highest villages in Spain, in fact some of the highest in Europe. For example, here we are looking at Bubion, which is at something like 1350 meters, but the highest village in the Alpujarra, Treveles, is actually at 1600 meters. And it's in these villages where you really do feel the legacy of Spain's Moorish past, most as far as the vernacular of the architecture goes. Typically, the houses are flat roofed, and the other great legacy of the Moors are the water channels, which bring water from the melt water from the high Sierra Nevada down to irrigate the terraces surrounding these villages. Some of these water channels run for 10, 12, 15 kilometers, and they are absolute masterpieces of engineering and monuments to human endeavor. Because who better than the Moors to appreciate, or the Arabs, who were the ruling class of the Moors, just how precious a commodity water really is. Once we get to the far eastern end of these villages, a challenging day leads up and over the very high pass of La Ragua. La Ragua is just over 2,000 meters, and on this day you're climbing 1,000 meters, and it's a long, tough climb. But that's there are a number of challenging days on the trail, which is one of the reasons I love it. Before dropping out of the Sierra, you then traverse the huge plain, constantly changing scenery on this walk, heading for the distant Sierra de Baza. Here the scenery is beginning to get rather drier, because now we've lost the influence of the Atlantic weather systems at this side of Andalusia, and you start to enter semi-desert type terrain. Very interesting part of the tour. This is one of the areas of Europe where the presence of man has been pushed back the furthest. And one of the villages through which you pass is home to a museum dedicated to the Orce man, who's been dated back to the very earliest period of Homo sapiens. Leading on, you can see very different scenery to that of the high mountains, but eventually we cross over a final little projection of the Sierra de Cathola and arrive at the end of the trail. One thing, just in passing, should you choose to walk the GR7, I would recommend having the GPX tracks downloaded. I actually find it incredibly useful just to upload them to Google Earth before setting out and just seeing what's probably going to be happening and what should happen during the course of the walk. Another little, maybe a little plus, if you're interested in botany, you can download from the Cicerone resources a fairly comprehensive list of Andalusian wildflowers, which of course are at their beautiful best during the Andalusian springtime, as well as an Andalusian bird checklist, which was very kindly provided to me for use by Peter Jones, who's one of the most better-known ornithologists in Europe. And birding is very much a part of the route as well. And so there you have it. Interestingly, the Ruta Francés of the Camino de Santiago clocks in at about, I believe, 800 kilometers. And the northern version of the GR7 is about 740. And the southern version, that's taken together with the common section, clocks in at about 780. So if you have the luxury of taking time out and are thinking of hiking the whole trail or one variant of it, you'll need between 5 and 6 weeks to comfortably cover the ground. And that's it. One thing I would say is just as in conclusion, I walked the trail in 2019, and at times I was walking in winter and maybe a little during the summer when not too many people are around. But in the whole way, in a total of 1,200 and something kilometers, I reckon I met about 20 walkers. So that tells you, that gives you some idea of just how wild a trail it can feel in parts. So I'm going to leave my slideshow now and try and get back into the meeting. Yep.
Hello. You are
Hello.
back in the meeting.
I'm back
Thank
in the meeting.
you.
Okay.
You are. That was fantastic. Thank you, Guy. Yeah, it was really interesting, really nice to somebody's just said thank you for the guided tour along the GR7, and that's what it felt like, a very brief guided tour. So
Yeah.
we've got loads of questions. We're always really lucky with the audience sending lots of interesting questions. So I'm going to try and rattle through some of those. But this is a first for us. We've been asked to do a shout out, which never happens, but there's a first for everything. So we've got a big shout out to Guy from Joel, Susan, Pete and Mary on the Mendocino coast in Northern California. They say, we highly recommend Guy's coast to coast walk in Andalusia, a fantastic 21-day walk. And I promise that's not something that the marketing team has come up with. That is from genuine people recommending the coast to coast walk. So thank you guys for sending that in. That's really nice.
Can I just say a thumbs up to you, all four of you? Wonderful to get your message. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we've got tons of questions. A quick one from me. I've seen the Caminito del Rey. I've seen quite a lot of articles about, and it looks like it's completely horrific. Have you ever done it? And is it as terrifying as it looks?
Yeah. Well, in answer to your question, yes, I did do it. And I walked the Caminito a number of times, something like 32 years ago, before it was restored. So I'm, without being too nostalgic, it was terrifying. And interestingly, I was just looking at an article on it today. Before it was restored, 6 people actually died on the Caminito from falling, because there were huge sections of it which just weren't there. So before it was restored, you needed ropes, and it was gated off at either end. And in those days, it was a terrifying experience. Nowadays, what they did, in fact, was built a second walkway above the original extremely damaged walkway. And it's got a high fence on one side, and you walk it in groups with a monitor, with proper helmets. And so unless you suffer from vertigo, I would say absolutely not. It wouldn't be a terrifying experience. But it is a mighty impressive gorge. It really would be worth, if you can take the time out to book a tour. But it's become one of Malaga province's and even one of Andalucia's most popular tourist visits. And it gets booked up months ahead. So if you are thinking of booking on, you should really do it well before you come to do your GR7 walk.
Okay, right. I think that's probably a no from me, to be honest. But it's good to hear that it's been improved. And then we have another question about something potentially scary. How are the sheepdogs in Andalusia? Because sometimes they can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because I know, just having walked so much with groups here in Andalusia, how very frightening it can be when you're approaching a remote farm and a dog begins to snarl at you. Now, in all my years of walking, I have never, in Andalusia, I've seen a lot of dogs, and I've never seen anybody bitten badly by a dog. I've seen many people frightened by dogs, and I'm not advising any of your listeners or walkers to do this, but every time I come across, or a dog comes running up to me and starts to snarl, I walk slowly at the dog with my hand out, and generally speaking, in many cases, the dog simply rolls over on his back and adopts the submissive position. I'm not saying that everybody would want to do that, of course, no. But really, nearly all of the dogs at farms are on chains, sadly, often only fed dry crusts of bread, or behind fences. But getting back to what I said originally, I really have not personally witnessed anybody ever being bitten by a dog on one of my walks.
Okay, well, yeah, that's good to know also. We've got a couple of people asking questions about the weather and the time of year, and when's best to walk the GR7. In particular, when are you likely to avoid the snow, and how early in the spring can you do the GR7?
Yeah. Okay. So firstly, the snow is really only going to be an issue on the section which leads you around the south side of the Sierra Nevada. So there, definitely the advice would be to avoid the winter months. So that would definitely, and the Alpujarra, the villages through which it passes, are so beautiful in springtime. And Cathola, further to the northeast of the Sierra Nevada, Cathola can also get heavy snow. I once got into trouble in Cathola because I didn't have my chains with me. It sounds amazing, but in southern Spain, needing tire chains, I couldn't get out of the park without the chains. It was tricky. So Cathola and Granada, which are both kind of at the tail end of the walks, they are best avoided during the winter months. Otherwise, Andalusia is definitely a very good 3-season walking destination. I've often taken groups at Christmas, and out of 14 days of walking, maybe we've had 12, 13 days of sunshine. You never know, so it's always a question of packing for all seasons. Springtime, of course, is like anywhere really in Southern Europe. Anywhere from mid-April through to mid-May is, I'd say, the optimum time to be walking here, because the spring flowers here are simply extraordinary. It's a complete explosion every springtime. But really more important than the months to choose, I would say, are the 2 months to avoid almost at all costs, which are July and August, because at that time of year, temperatures can regularly get into the 36, 37, 38, even sometimes pushing 40 degrees. And for a lot of people, that really is just too hot for comfortable walking. And it does help, of course, the sun is up early, so you can set off early in the day. There's only one place where you can walk on the route, I would say comfortably, and it's where I'm speaking to you from, which is the that southern side of the Sierra Nevada. Avoid it in the winter, but here you really can walk comfortably during the summer months, which is what I've been doing these last weeks. Today, for example, maximum temperature has been 24 degrees. And last night, when we went up to our local bar for a tapa, we took light jerseys, fleeces with us. So, whereas if you were nearer to Ronda, you could expect, or down on the coast, you could expect temperatures to be maybe 5 degrees higher than they are here.
Okay, so we have a question about this. I think we should avoid weather on this because the weather is an obvious difference. But somebody has asked, what is the difference between walking in Andalusia compared with, for example, the English Lake District?
Well,
can you possibly answer that?
I must say, Hannah, well, my only visit to the Lake District was on my very first walking holiday when I was 16 years old, and we stayed at a beautiful little hostel near to Ashness Bridge. I still remember it well, and got into trouble coming down Scarfell when the clouds came down very quickly. The difference, totally different weather. Yeah, I guess walking in the lakes in summer is fine, but I'm sorry, I'm really not much of an expert on that.
No, that's fine. We did invite you here as an expert in Andalusia, so asking about the Lake District is a bit left field. But yeah, I guess there's lots of differences, and I guess Neon, you're going to have to go and give us your own answer to that question. So let us know in a couple of months' time when you've been to Andalusia.
Apologies for my ignorance on that.
No, that's fine. Marcia and David want to come and stay in Nerja or Estepona, and they want to know about what the weather will be like in February, roughly. And also, are they nice towns to stay in, and do they give good access to day hikes?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the mountains behind Nerja are simply stunning. You walk inland for 2 kilometers from Nerja and you are in wild mountain terrain. It really is. It's one of the areas described in Walking in Andalusia. I have 6 great hikes in that area. And the place to base yourself, there are a number of very beautiful villages just back from the coast. February is absolutely fine for walking. When I say fine, it's going to be mild. It's not going to be too cold, but you never know in Andalusia, any time between September and mid-May, you may get rain. So you can never guarantee that it's going to be dry, but it's certainly temperature-wise, it's very comfortable for walking. And if I were to choose 2 of the villages, which would be a very good choice as basis for your hikes. This is all in my Walking in Andalusia book. It would be either Frigiliana, which is regularly voted one of the prettiest villages in Spain, which looks out to the Mediterranean and has magnificent and very wild gorge walking, very, very close, straight out from the village, or Competa, which is probably about, as the vulture fly is probably only about 15 kilometers away from Frihliana, although it's a very tortuous mountain road which connects the two. Both of the villages have good accommodation options, but you should expect to hear a lot of English being spoken in the bars and restaurants, because these are both villages have very large expat communities. But yeah, I wouldn't stay down in Nerja, because you'll be needing to drive to the trailheads. Frigiliana or Compita would be first choice.
And just a point on English being spoken, actually, you say in one of your guidebooks that it's not necessarily widely spoken everywhere, and you do encourage people to learn a few phrases.
That is very true, Hannah. In fact, I'd say it's the exception rather than the norm. Even at hotels, little hotels, remember the GR7 takes you quite well off the beaten track. So if you were thinking about checking into a hotel in Nerja or somewhere along the Costa del Sol, Ronda, Granada, Cordoba, these are tourist destinations. Yes, you probably would expect your receptionist to be able to speak English, but in many places, no, hardly a word. So I've always thought, somewhat surprisingly, so a little Spanish really goes a long way. And so I would recommend having a little phrase book with you. Or, of course, nowadays you've got pretty clever apps which you can speak into and the words appear.
Yeah, I think it's good practice anyway, isn't it, to wherever you are, try and learn how to say please and thank you and order a beer or a coffee or whatever. I think it's a nice thing to do anyway.
Yeah, that's
but especially when you're getting a bit more off the beaten track. I mean, I think one of the reasons why so many people love doing these more remote trips is because it's a really good way to see into the true heart of a region or a country, is by walking through it. You don't get that touristy experience so much, but that does then also mean that the facilities maybe are not as built up around tourists as well.
Absolutely, and really many of the villages through which you pass, probably if you are hiking the GR7, you won't see another foreigner. It really is, they really are quite off-piste, some of these villages. The other thing I should also have mentioned as far as language goes, Hannah, is that Andalusian is has a very pronounced accent, and it's a very lazy accent. So something like más o menos 200 becomes más o menos 200. It's all run together. And I arrived in Spain 33 years ago, having studied Spanish and taught at a university in South America. And I thought that my Spanish was pretty much perfect. And I walked into our local bar, and I can honestly say I hardly understood a word anybody was saying. It's almost like a broad Geordie accent, which can be very difficult for some of us to understand. Absolutely nothing against the Geordie accent. But yeah, it's a difficult accent. So, but definitely a little bit of Spanish. The Spanish are always they're incredibly hospitable and welcoming people, and they will do their very best to try to understand you.
Yeah, a smile and a couple of words goes a long way, I think, in communication.
Sure.
We have a question from Inbar. I'm sure she asks this question every single live event, but we love that she watches them all with us. She wants to know about wild camping along the GR7. Is that permitted along the GR7?
Now, maybe you shouldn't quote me on this. In my experience of camping in Spain, I have never been told to move a tent, even when I've camped pretty much everywhere. I'd say it's what a lot of the time, as you approach the villages along the way, you're actually leaving the boundaries of the national park. So once you're within a couple of kilometers of the village, you're maybe coming out of the forest and you're beginning to get into more cultivated areas surrounding the villages, fields, etc. And in my experience, nobody will hardly ever object if you were to pitch a tent there, or if you pass a little farm a couple of kilometers from the village you're walking to, why not just ask the farmer, would you mind if I just put my tent in the corner of your field for tonight? And I would guarantee that I would say 19 out of 20 times, maybe even 20 out of 20, people would say, yeah, come on, go ahead. I can't say here that you should camp in a national park. The anti-camping laws, what we have to remember, are really kind of drawn up with irresponsible people in mind, because in Spain, especially because of the risk of fire, which obviously in summer and the early autumn is really a great danger. So yeah, although you shouldn't camp in the parks, a lot of them are so remote, and if you were just to turn off the trail and hike 5 minutes up the hill, but I'm sure you would rather me not suggest breaking any laws. But certainly close to the villages, no problem at all. What should be said on the camping, on the question of camping, is there are very few campsites along the GR7. I would say out of the, let's say, about 75 villages through which the route passes, maybe more like 100. From memory, probably about 10 have campsites. And one thing about the campsites is also, even if you're not planning to camp and you're looking for just overnight accommodation, a lot of the campsites have little cottages. Those which do exist in Andalusia, nearly all of them, in fact, have little cottages and log cabins, etc. And it can be a really good place to put up for the night. They can be really good places because they nearly all have laundry facilities as well. And of course, if you're on a long, you've been on the trail for a week or so, coming across a washing machine to be able to do a wash can be a really nice bonus.
Speaking of washing and water, what's the drinking water availability like along the trail?
Varies a great deal. Where we are at the moment, for example, in the Alpujarra, you've got meltwater everywhere. Every village has maybe 5 or 6 springs. Every village, of course, has drinking water and will have some kind of point, a tap, or if it doesn't actually have a spring, it's certainly easy enough to fill up. It will be chlorinated water, of course, in villages. By law, yeah, every village, of course, has to have its water treated. So personally, I much prefer to fill up at springs. But there are some legs where you might be on the trail for something like 20 kilometers without coming across water, in which case, obviously, it would make sense to carry as much as possible. Generally speaking, in my walking guides, I recommend that people, when they go out on one of my day walks, should take at least 2 liters of water with them. I mean, that sounds an awful lot, but I'd say the main walking in close to the Mediterranean during the warmer months, the biggest threat or danger rather is dehydration. So never skimp on the water when you're heading out.
Yeah, gosh, I drink 2 liters in an afternoon, so I'd need
Right.
I need more than that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I sometimes drink up to 5 liters on a long walk in summer, and it's It's extraordinary how you can just keep drinking and in it goes and in it goes. Yeah.
Right, we still have more questions coming in, so I'm really sorry we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but I'll try and get through a few more. We have a comment from Peter. He says, "Hi Guy, he met you in Grazalema just before lockdown last year. He's had 5 holidays in Moticoto and has walked all the walks in the Grazalema region of your Walking in Andalusia guidebook. Can't wait to get back." I'm loving this theme of sending in nice comments about the books. This is fantastic. It's really nice to hear from, when we work in the publishing side of things. You don't often hear from people who've been out and actually walked the route. So thank you, Peter, for sending that. We have another question. There's some people, they're thinking of staying in I don't know how you pronounce that. Mulhathin?
Staying there.
Okay. Are there any mountains local to... Oh, this is really challenging me. Are there any mountains local to Cajil we can look to climb? That's from George.
Sorry, could you spell are there any mountains close to where?
I have no idea how you said it. It's Carchelejo.
Carchalejo. Carchalejo. It's on the, gosh, you're a fair way from the Mulhathin, but you're actually right on the GR7. But as far as local mountains go, I'm afraid from memory, I can't answer. As far as Mulhathin goes, Mulhathin is the highest mountain in the Sierra Nevada, which the person who's sent in the question, I assume, knows. And you can climb it as a day hike. It's going to be a long day. If you go up via the Poquera refuge, it's going to be something like 6 hours up and down. Or if you can, the route that I prefer, up from Treveles via Siete Lagunas, these beautiful mountain towns, that's more like an 8-hour day. It's a long, tough day of climbing because you've got more than, you've got 2,000 meters of ascent. So that's about getting on for 7,000 feet of climbing straight up. Great walk, but there is the Poquera refuge, which you can book, which if you want to divide the day, But I'm afraid as far as Carchalejo goes, I don't know offhand. I can't give any advice there, sorry.
Okay, that's no problem. Finally, do you still do guided tours?
Yes, I do indeed. When I say still, it's been obviously for all of us, a very strange 18 months. After lockdown, I led about 3 walks during the springtime, during a period in which, normally speaking, I'd probably be out maybe 3 times during the course of a week. I no longer do group walks, but I do one-off bespoke walks, normally for families, couples, groups of 4. And I meet people in the village close to the trailhead. Maybe we transfer a bit higher up the mountain in my 4x4, and we say goodbye at the end of the day. So yes, indeed, I lead day walks and love doing it. It's what I like doing most of all.
That was from Eva in Stockholm. So if she gets a couple of friends together, then she can organise something with you, maybe.
I think it might be Eva who I wonder. Well, I suppose Eva is a common Swedish name, but if it's Eva from Tilsfot, thank you for the question, Eva.
Right, very, very quickly. We did see the incredible griffon vultures in your video. Are there any other wild animals that you might see in Andalusia?
Wild animals, generally speaking, I always say that Andalusia is better for birds than mammals. What mammals will you expect to see somewhere along the GR7? Certainly plenty of ibex, possibly badger, foxes, red roe deer. Egyptian mongoose are a common sighting. People sometimes, because of their sort of long, low body and long tail, they sometimes get mistaken for otters. Fantastic range of butterflies here. If we're just going into the whole fauna gig, butterflies. I know people who bring butterflying tours here. Lots and lots of insects, of course. Quite a few snakes. You should expect to see snakes, but they'll always get out of the way of you long before you get out of the way for them, of them. Andalusia does have a poisonous snake, the Latastes viper. But really, if I can just say how wonderful the bird life is. If you're into ornithology, Andalusia really is the place. We tend to think first of all about the big birds, and we've got huge colonies of many colonies of griffon vultures, Egyptian vultures, lammergeiers. We've got short-toed, booted, golden eagles. We've got the Spanish imperial eagle that we mentioned, and in general, it's Andalusia is one of the best birding destinations in Europe. You've got the wetland reserve at the far end of the Rio Guadalquivir, where hundreds of thousands of birds winter. And we are on the main migration route between Europe and Africa. So the spring and the autumn passages are one of the most extraordinary wildlife events that you can see when the honey buzzard migration is on, and you see it's almost it's simply mind-boggling when because they of course choose to cross the strait at its most narrow point, as they do at the far end of Europe across the Bosphorus.
Brilliant. We're about done with time. We have another question from Helmut, and it's a very specific question, so I'm just going to ask him now if he can email it to live@cicerone.co.uk, and I will forward that to Guy, and we'll see if we can come up with an answer for you on that one. We are running out of time, so I don't want to answer it here or ask Guy here, but please do email that to us, and we will figure something out. So, wow, that just went by in an absolute flash. I think we did really well. I hope our audience agrees that we did well to get through as many questions as possible. So thank you, Guy, for being an expert on almost everything that you were asked, apart from the Lake District. I think that's fair. So yeah, thank you. It's been really good fun. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has. And thank you, Guy, for joining us.
Sorry about the technical glitch at the beginning. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, it's fashionable these days to have errors on the technical side, so don't worry at all. Thank you everybody else for joining us. I'm always grateful that we get so many questions. It does keep things moving on nice and quickly, so thank you for that. The recording will be available on the Facebook page, on YouTube, and on our own website, so you can rewatch it, or you can send it to people who might have missed the event tonight. Remember to use the discount code if you'd like a copy of any of the guidebooks. Whilst you're on our website, please do also make sure you check out our articles, our upcoming events, and footnotes, the Cicerone podcast. And hopefully we'll see you at our next live event, or if you're in Andalusia, there's a good chance you'll bump into Guy on the trails. Thanks very much, everybody, and good night.
Good night.